Now, I think we might be able to go back to the Labour Party conference. Let me just wait for... Yes, we can. Angela Rayner is making her way to the stage with a bit of a musical fanfare. She is the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party. Let's listen.
Conference, Angela Rayner, first time Deputy Leader. I think I can still say that, Chair, because I know it's 18 months since you, our members, affiliated unions and supporters gave me the honour of serving as your Deputy Leader, but this is the first time I've had the privilege and the pleasure of speaking to you in person. At conference, there's nothing quite like party conference. But there's some things we didn't miss. The warm wine, the beige buffets, 8 hours compositing meeting if you were lucky. The struggle takes many forms. But you know, our movement has been a family to me throughout my life. And like so many families, we've waited patiently to gather in person. So here we are, and it's great to see so many in the hall. And even better, now we're off Zoom, because they can't even mute me. Conference, on the day I was declared your Deputy Leader, I just wanted to get on with working for the party. I wanted to stand up, speak out, but I could barely stand and I could barely speak. Because like so many, I'd caught coronavirus. And I know too well that I am lucky to have lived through it, when others, including members of my own family, did not. And I'm grateful that I'm here today, and I'm grateful to all those who helped our country survive it too. We saw the very best of our movement through this crisis. Our Labour councillors and mayors fought for their communities alongside Manchester's finest, Marcus Rashford. They fed hungry kids when ministers wouldn't. The Welsh Labour government led the UK's most successful vaccination programme. Our trade unions fought for furlough, for PPE and for their members to stay safe. And our key workers. You served our country. You saved our country. You deserve better, and Britain deserves better, and Labour will be better. Conference, we must become the government our nation deserves, not the one it has. When I think about the sacrifices working people have made, I think of Jill and Leslie, Unison reps, who live in my constituency and do the same job that I used to do. They visit elderly and vulnerable people who can't manage on their own. They're paid less than the minimum wage, which is already too low to live on because they're not paid between the visits. With every trip, for every person they care for, they face the choice. Do I cut down on my time caring, or do I work longer without pay? And it's not a choice for Jill and Leslie. They're carers in every sense because they care deeply for the people they look after. They value their work and they take great pride in it. They deserve not just fair pay and decent conditions, but dignity and respect. Basic values of our party and of our country too. That's why today, conference, I'm publishing our green paper on employment rights. And conference, I just want to thank Andy MacDonald, who's over there. Andy, stand up for me. Our Shadow Secretary of State for Employment Rights. And I want to thank our Shadow Minister, Imran Hussain, and Andy's whole team, who have gone into tremendous work producing our most detailed set of policies to date. And Andy, we couldn't ask for a better person to be our future Secretary of State. And I want to thank our affiliated trade unions for all the meetings, discussion and research that went into this. And we didn't even provide you with a beer and sandwiches. Conference, I'm not presenting you with a policy document that will sit on a shelf collecting dust. Let's make this real and show every worker in every workplace, in every corner of our country, that with their support, their lives, their jobs, their communities can and will be better. Conference, this green paper is for every parent tearing your hair out, trying to get childcare, or missed a sports day, or a parents' evening because you couldn't come in early or leave early. It's for every young person who daren't not turn down a shift on 0 hours contract because you might not get hours next week, and you can't take a break, and you can't get sick. And it's for every worker who went to work and never made it home, and for their families who will never see them again. Conference, this is the reality for millions of people all around our country. But it doesn't have to be this way. The Tories' political choices made it this way. Labour will make different choices, not by turning back the clock to a bygone era, but by facing the future with workers' rights fit for a modern world. We will empower people to have a real say over their own working lives. And in this hall, we know, conference, that our greatest power comes from not when we stand alone, but when we stand and work together. Throughout our history, that is how victories and progress for working people has been achieved. And conference, no one knows that better than the Shrewsbury 24. After 47 years, they got their day in court, and finally, they got that miscarriage of justice overturned. And it's that same spirit and tradition that I'm announcing today, our plan for fair pay agreements. A Labour government will bring together representatives of workers and employers to negotiate pay and conditions in every sector. Collective bargaining in every sector will end the free market free-for-all that encourages undercutting, exploitation and a race to the bottom. Conference, it will give workers and their representatives a legally enforceable seat at the table to set a fair rate for the job, agree basic standards and tackle gender and ethnicity pay gaps, end discrimination, promote equality and make work accessible for disabled workers. A conference as a former care worker, we'll start with social care for people like Jill and Leslie. Jill and Leslie and the 600,000 carers who are paid less than the living wage. In New Zealand, our sister parties establishing agreements just like these. In Wales, our own Labour government social partnership means that workers have a real say on issues that impact on their lives. And as trade unionists, I know, and you know, there is no better way to deliver a better deal for working people than empowering trade unions to negotiate on our behalf. But you know, conference, some things are not negotiable. So Labour in power will give all workers rights from day one in their jobs: sick pay, holiday pay, parental leave and protection against unfair dismissal. We will create one single worker status, banning bogus self-employment and ending the absurd situation in which you can wear a uniform, work regular hours for one sole business and yet be considered by the law to be self-employed. You're either a worker or you're genuinely self-employed. And either way, we will change your working life for the better. And we will not only ban zero-hour contracts, but ensure that all contracts come with minimum hours and reflect normal working life, requiring notice of shift changes and pay when they're cancelled at the last minute. At conference, I think of the young parent in my own constituency, trying to bring up a child while working shifts on a zero-hour contract, each week hoping that their shift can work around the childcare because they can't leave the little one waiting at the school gates, but they have to put food on the table too. A Labour government will change their life by writing common decency and fairness into the rules of our economy. At conference, that's why Labour will end the scandalous practice of fire and rehire once and for all. It's why I stood with the members of Unite and GMB as they took action at companies like British Airways and British Gas. And I said to those companies, if you use the country's name, you better respect the country's values. And when I'm Deputy Prime Minister, it won't just be words they'll face, but the full force of the law. Conference never, under a Labour government, will bad employers hold all the cards in a stacked deck. That applies to work-life balance too. A global pandemic has reinforced for a lot of us how precious time off is and how utterly exhausting the daily grind can be. So Labour will introduce a new right to flexible working as the default, protections for those with caring responsibilities and a right to switch off too. Now, working from home has given some of us a new freedom and flexibility, but it's also blurred the lines between what is home and what is work. A new economy needs workers' rights that reflect the way we work now. We will learn the lessons of this pandemic. increasing statutory sick pay and making it universal so that everyone can afford to live while they're off sick or self-isolating. That's not only fair for working people, but it's vital for all our health as well. At conference, we will put mental health and safety on a legal par with physical health and safety. And we will make sure the laws are enforced by a new empowered watchdog, unlike this government, which has not prosecuted one single case over unsafe work in the pandemic. The Tories will say that to be pro-worker is to be anti-business. Conference, we have to nail that lie. So many businesses play by the rules. They do the right thing, but are undercut by the offshore and the unscrupulous. Many of them small and medium-sized businesses who are the backbone of local and regional economies. They deserve better too. The country has already waited too long, already shouldered too heavy a burden. And as your Deputy Prime Minister, I will go into government with our first Green Paper already prepared, and within the first 100 days of coming into office, we will sign into law the New Deal for working people. And conference, I absolutely believe that these policies will transform our country and the lives of its people. And what a contrast to a government that is taking £1,400 out of the pockets of a nurse. Over £2 billion that they're giving to taxpayers' money has been dished out to their Tory donors and mates and ministers. There's only one rule with this cabinet, and that is that there's one rule for them and one rule for all of us. Like the Foreign Secretary, cancelling leave for our troops and then trooping off to the beach. One rule for them, another rule for us. The Prime Minister who got pinged and tried to go to work anyway. One rule for them, another rule for us. And who can forget the Barnard Castle eye test? One rule for them, another rule for us. And you know what? It matters because when they use the public purse as a personal cash point, we literally all pay the bill. Billions were wasted on useless equipment. We now spend nearly £1 million a day simply storing it. Our money lying in the pockets of their mates. Or in the case of the Health Secretary, £30 million going to his pub landlord. He's now been ordered by the court, apparently, to hand over his WhatsApp messages, but quite frankly, I don't think I want to know what's on Matt Hancock's WhatsApp. But conference, I do promise you this. We'll stop the dodgy deals handing public money to ministers' mates. It's bad news for my pub landlord, but it's good news for the public. And let me tell you this. As the Minister for Procurement, I won't sign a single penny that goes to a company that exploits its workers or doesn't pay its taxes. Conference, we will stamp out the Tory sleaze that has polluted our politics and corrupted our democracy. The racket is over, their time is up. A Labour government will sweep away the failed system. Our Integrity and Ethics Commission will do what it says on the tin, put integrity and ethics back into government. And conference, I can't think of anyone better to lead that change than our Shadow Cabinet Office team and Cat Smith, our Shadow Minister for Democracy. Just imagine, conference. Just imagine a Minister for Democracy who's actually for democracy. And we've got Jack Dromey, who brings a lifetime of experience in the Labour movement, and Fleur Anderson, who won Putney from the Tories and has never shied away from a fight. And who can forget our Diane Hayter, who has beaten the Tories in the Lords countless times, and Floris, who's one of our brightest rising stars of our movement. And it will be led from the top. And what a contrast, conference, our leader is to the current Prime Minister. Ours has a lifetime of public service. Theirs has a lifetime of self-service. Conference in 1945, our party put forward a manifesto called Let Us Face the Future. And I believe that is our task this week. Then, as now, our country stood together in the face of a global crisis. A crisis that we survived through shared values of collectivism, community and public service. Labour values, British values. Then, as now, we were proud of our country and our communities. And yes, working people were proud of our class as well. Then, as now, we wanted better. In 1945, the country faced a choice between a Tory government who sought the credit for the shared achievement but longed for the status quo that preceded it, where the state would step back and the market would rule again, where people knew their place and took what was given, or a Labour government that would harness the values that saved a nation and make a country fit for those who had fought for it too. Our country chose to face that future. And now, conference, let us face the future again. Thank you.
Standing ovation there for the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Angela Rayner, formally kicking off this year's annual conference in Brighton, and true to form, announcing that plan for a so-called fair pay agreement. Our political correspondent Helen Catt is in Brighton and she was listening to that speech, and we can talk about it with her now. Trying to make working life fairer for everyone, Helen, is really the sort of thrust of that policy idea.
Yeah, there was quite a lot of different elements in there, wasn't there? So you were talking about there, you mentioned the fair pay agreement, which is the sort of the flagship, I think, element of this green paper that Angela Rayner talked about. Of course, she is, of course, the Shadow Secretary for the Future of Work, not just the Deputy Leaders. This is why this sort of falls into her remit to do. So she talked about this fair pay agreement, talked about how it was being already enacted in New Zealand, about how it would bring together employers and workers to come up with these binding agreements on wages and conditions across sectors. She also talked about giving increasing statutory sick pay, giving people the rights to things like sick pay, holiday pay, parental leave from day one of their working life, of creating a new worker status. So you're either just a worker or you're self-employed, that there's no sort of grey areas within that. She talked about banning 0 hours contracts, about writing common decency and fairness, as she put it, into the law to allow people to do things, to be able to work around their childcare, all that sort of thing. She talked about never letting bad employers hold all the cards. So it was very much a large range of measures, but certainly very much designed to reinforce and boost the rights of workers. She was very careful, though, to also say that just being pro-worker didn't mean that the party was anti-business. It's often a criticism that's thrown Labour's way. She says that, you know, lots of small businesses play by the rules, and this is about stopping other employers from undercutting those who do that. So quite along the speech there from her, detailing all of those number of policy points in a green paper that she says would be enacted by a Labour government within 100 days of them coming to power. She said it's there and she'd go with it.
Also criticism of the government. I mean, she criticism the Conservatives in so many different ways, Helen, but couldn't quite resist talking about how they dealt with COVID and, in her view, too many contracts going to too many friends of ministers.
Yeah, it's that refrain that we've heard from Labour consistently actually throughout the pandemic, this idea of the Cabinet having one rule for them, one rule for the others. And she mentioned a few of the incidents which have come up that have actually levelled that criticism for. So, for example, the Prime Minister and when he tried to take part in a scheme which would allow him not to self-isolate when he was pinged to self-isolate. She referenced that. She referenced Dominic Raab going on his holidays, whilst she said it cancelling leave for the forces. So there was, as you'd expect, a lot of lines there flagging up those. She described it as Tory sleaze, said she would sweep away a failed system, and talked about Labour replacing that with the bringing integrity and ethics back into government. So you would expect there to be bringing up some of those more political attacks too, and certainly, as you said, she certainly did that, sort of bringing up these issues that we've seen throughout the pandemic, and again reinforcing that idea that Labour has levelled at the government consistently, that one rule for them, one rule for everyone else.
Helen, for the moment, thank you very much. Helen Catt at the Labour Party conference in Brighton.